Welcome to the Global Spark,
a podcast for LGBTI plus youth who want to become more aware of advocacy strategies and initiate projects within their own communities to create LGBTI plus freedom.
So, hello, I am Jorge, originally from Mexico City and currently a grad student at NYU and the director of research at the Global Center. And I am here with my co-host, Cai. How are you today, Cai?
Wonderful. So excited to be here with you, Jorge. So I'm Cai, located in San Diego, and I'm the COO of the Global Center. Global Center is launching this podcast, and we will bring it to you every month. We are your co-hosts.
And every month, we'll bring to you topics that are facing the LGBTI community globally, hearing from people in different places
and diverse backgrounds and identities.
And now we're gonna read the global queer news updates.
Every week, the Global Center releases the Global Queer News, which you can find on our website, and it highlights the most pressing news relating to the oppression of or the celebration of LGBTI plus rights globally. This week, sadly, we see that the Ghanaian government continues moving forward with the draft of the bill, Promotion of Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill, in which LGBTQ Ghanaians could face jail time or be coerced into conversion therapy, a widely discredited practice. In Turkey, 19 are acquitted of charges for organizing and participating in a pride march in 2019. And in the United States, Sally Ride becomes the first ever known LGBT person to appear on US Money. For more updates, check out our Global Queer News section on our website.
So now that we know the news, we're gonna head to present our invitee. The name of the episode is Pronouns Matter, and today we are celebrating International Pronouns Day. So for our first episode, we're bringing in a special guest, Andi Simon. Yay! Andi has collaborated with the Global Center on numerous projects, and we wouldn't be where we are today without them. Thank you very much for joining us, Andi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Andi is a youth mentor and educator living in the Catskills, New York. They are a teacher and advocate for the queer and trans youth in their home community and taking advantage of their role with the Global Center to expand their impact far and wide. Andi's professional interests include community engagement and youth mentorship. They hold a BA from Penn State University and an MA from Westchester University, as well as a K-12 teaching license. So excited that you're here with us today, Andi.
I'm so excited to be here and be a part of International Pronouns Day.
Oh, thank you. We're very grateful, actually. So please tell us, what are your pronouns, Andi?
Thank you so much for asking. My pronouns are they, them, theirs.
Okay, thank you. And is this something that has evolved over time? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so when I first started learning about gender theory and that the gender binary really is a construct, I started using the pronouns she, they. I was assigned female at birth. I was raised and socialized as a girl and a woman. So my pronouns for the majority of my life were she, her, hers. And then I started learning about how gender is a construct. I wanted to be open to the idea that my gender is something that is kind of made up, and I can assign my own gender. And so I wanted to open that up a little bit, and that's why I added they. So I was going by she, her, or they, them. And then a couple of months later, as I got further into my research and really started learning what gender fluidity was and how my gender identity is so much more than just what I was assigned, because I do feel a connection to womanhood and being raised and socialized as a woman, but I also recognize that there's so much more to me than that. So that's when I started going by they, them, theirs. But that being said, it's not super important to me. As I said, like, I still consider myself a woman that is part of who I am, even though it's not all of who I am. So people, and I present very feminine, so people will use she, her, hers pronouns for me all the time. And it's not my preference, but I'm not, I'm still growing and learning. So I'm okay with it for now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have a similar experience with exploring my own gender and what that, means and what the world has constructed around me. And I also use they them pronouns, and I know how affirming that can be when someone uses that for me. So can you talk a little bit about the relationship between someone who uses the correct pronouns and how that respects your gender and how that makes you feel?
Yeah, I mean, totally what you said about it being affirming, and not just that it affirms my gender identity and it affirms the experience that I've gone through learning and evolving through it, but it also is, tells me that that person respects me, and, they're willing to change their perception of me to, be an ally. And it really tells me that they're there for me and that they prioritize my safety over their comfort. Um, because I know for a lot of people, when you've known someone for a long time, it's challenging to use new pronouns for that person. But when somebody makes that effort, it really just shows to me that they care. And I think that that just goes for anyone who has a pronoun change in their life. um, I think making that effort and acknowledging their identity and the pronouns that they ask you to use, I think that is just a huge step in making people feel that they belong, that they're welcome, that they're safe. Uh, and that's really all that I ask.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I feel the same. No? I use the pronouns he, they, and I don't care about being misgendered. But of course, I would prefer people to use my pronouns. No? And so, and especially talking about neopronouns, no? Like, what do you think is the best way to ask for someone's pronouns, Andi?
I think the best way is to introduce your own pronouns. So if I was meeting you for the first time, I might say, "Hi, I'm Andi. My pronouns are they, them." And then that invites you to share yours, but you also don't have to if you don't want to. Um, Maybe someone, if you said, "What are your pronouns?" maybe somebody would be really excited by the opportunity, the explicit opportunity to share, but it's also possible that they might feel put on the spot depending on the environment you're in or the situation you're in. So I always find that sharing mine first is a great way to extend the invitation for someone to share theirs. Um, I will also wear sometimes a pin, like a lapel pin with my pronouns on it. And sometimes people will see it and be like, "Oh, well, my pronouns are such and such." I think it's also uh, not a, it's kind of a fresh thing, I think, in mainstream society to ask for people's pronouns. But if I don't know, and you don't want to assume, sometimes people are very obvious, you know, well, I get, maybe I shouldn't say that. um, I won't be shy about it if I really am unsure and I want to make sure that I'm creating an inclusive environment. I will straight up ask. I'll be like, "What pronouns do you use?" And sometimes people don't really know what I'm talking about, and they'll be like, what?" Or I had a funny interaction where I asked someone for their pronouns and they said, "Mister." um, so I guess they just didn't really understand what I was asking. But in my experience, the best way to get someone else's pronouns is to start by sharing your own.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I hear that. One thing for me that I know that I'm still struggling with is introducing myself with people who are new. I mean, like I just recently moved to San Diego, and like navigating that environment of reintroducing myself again, and which is a great opportunity, but at the same time, I just struggle because I don't know where these people are coming from. I don't know, like, their belief system. And so that's one thing that I definitely struggle with. Do you have any tips on like being more confident and just being more bold and being like, these are my pronouns? What are yours?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say that your safety, and this goes for everybody, your safety is the most important thing. So if you are unsure of how disclosing your pronouns will be received by the people you're interacting with, and you feel that the safer or like self-preserving thing to do would just to not share, that's perfectly fine. And that doesn't mean that you're like invalid in any way in your gender expression or your gender identity. It just means that you're protecting yourself. And, sometimes that's the right move. And then sometimes you just got to go for it. Last night, for example, I was at a party and I had a pin that had my pronoun because I was going to this party. I knew there were going to be people that I hadn't met before. And I didn't want to be misgendered at the party. And I know because I'm very feminine presenting, I was wearing a dress, I have long hair. I knew that people were going to use she, her pronouns if I didn't tell them otherwise at the very start. So I wore the pin on my lapel. So everyone who met me saw right away that those are my pronouns. And then later in the night, I did end up taking my jacket off. So the pin was no longer visible, but I had to make the decision if somebody refers to me as she, am I going to correct them or not? And I think in that setting, I was with a bunch of like-minded people, and there was plenty of queer and trans people in the room. So I felt very comfortable correcting people if they did misgender me. Um, I can't say what I would do in other situations. I typically just feel it out for my own level of comfort, because I do not like to put myself in situations that make me uncomfortable. I like to challenge myself and push my boundaries, but if I don't feel comfortable and I don't feel safe, then I'm not going to do it. And I think that also just speaks to my relationship with my pronouns. For some people, being misgendered is extremely triggering and can be very, very upsetting and can, ruin a night. Um, I think my relationship with my pronouns is not as fraught as it is for some people. Um, and so honestly, I don't know how that would play out if I had a different relationship with my pronouns. But I think starting with visible cues like pins or a necklace pendant or even earrings, um, that's a great way to be a little subtle. If you don't want to be subtle, I think it's a beautiful thing to say, "Hi, I'm Andi. My pronouns are they, them." Um, or, ask a friend, because I had a friend hosting this party. I could have said, "Hey, before I get there, can you let everyone know my pronouns are they, them?" So if you have someone there that you know and trust. So there are options, and I think there are people out there, content creators who can give excellent advice and who can share their personal stories. And I think especially since I'm gender fluid, non-binary, I think it's important to hear experiences and stories from people who are binary, trans, and all kinds of identities where a change of pronouns or assuming someone's pronouns could be messy. I think it's important to hear from multiple voices.
Yeah, I also like the poster of asking before assuming, obviously. And these examples are like very clear. And I believe it's all about creating opportunities for anyone to feel comfortable, no? With who one is and confident enough even to ask for what one may need, in order to feel comfortable in a specific situation. So I don't know, like speaking more broadly, like what can each of us do to turn environments into welcoming environments? And be like, considering your background, and everything you've been doing on this, I think it would be useful to share like some tips on, like just creating inclusive environments where everyone may feel welcome.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that I wish more people would ask. I think little things like putting your pronouns in your social media bio or in your email signature. Those things are little things are very important. I think learning neopronouns are very important, even if maybe you don't know someone personally who uses neopronouns. I think Googling and reading about them and familiarizing yourself with them and practicing using them is very important.
Excuse me, but so what are neopronouns, Andy?
So neopronouns are any third person singular or plural pronouns that are new or recent in history. The prefix neo is of Greek origin and it just means new or recent. So when we say neopronouns, we mean ones that are new and maybe unofficial in the language that they're being spoken in, but they are still totally real and totally valid and just as deserving of respect as traditional pronouns.
I think the biggest thing is learning about the use of gendered pronouns and understanding that it's not just about memorizing someone's pronouns, but it's about understanding gender identity and gender as a concept. And I think there's so much more to respecting gender as a concept. And I think there's so much more to respecting people's pronouns than just memorizing them and being able to use them correctly. I think it's really important to be able to understand how language has evolved and our modern day language, 2021 language has brought about the changes in people's pronouns. And I think there's a lot of work that people can do just reading, like Beyond the Binary, and other, just reading things, Googling things, seeking out queer and trans content creators and listening to their stories beyond just knowing that their pronouns are they, them, or she, her, or am, airs, just knowing what it means and not just repeating the words.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're mentioning Beyond the Binary, the book by Alok Vaid-Menon. Is that correct?
Yeah, Alok Vaid-Menon.
Yes. Yeah, no. They are a great content creator. And yeah, I would highly recommend people to follow them on Instagram and yeah.
Right.
And also, yeah, tap into the resources because they do have a lot of resources available. Yeah. All right. All right. So yeah, absolutely. Self-educating yourself, following people who are doing the work. Those are all wonderful ideas. One thing that I know, like in the practicality of using pronouns, is that a lot of people within the community or outside the community, but also within the community, they get really nervous about making a mistake, about using the wrong pronoun for someone. What can people do if they make a mistake? What would you recommend to them?
That's also a great question. If somebody makes a mistake, either when they're talking to you or about someone else in the third person, I think if you catch yourself making a mistake, a quick correction and redirection is perfectly fine. You don't need to apologize because then that puts the burden on the person you're talking to forgive you. And you don't necessarily need forgiveness for that. You made a mistake and you're owning up to it and you're moving on. If somebody corrects you, say thank you, correct yourself and move on. So let's say I'm talking about Britney Spears, and I say, "Oh, they are retiring from performance," and somebody might say, "She's retiring from performance," and I would say, "Thank you, she's retiring from performance," and just move on. If someone's talking to me, or I'm in the room and someone's like, "Oh, Andi, she lives on a farm," and I would just be like, "They live on a farm," and then that person would be like, "Oh, thank you, they live on a farm." Just making it brief, not dwelling on it, because when you make a big deal out of it, it can put other people on the spot. It can make people feel like they owe you forgiveness or they owe you an explanation. It's just best to move on. And then if you feel really hung up about it and you need to, approach someone and give an apology privately, that's, depends on your relationship with that person. I personally think it's best to move on, and commit to do better next time. It's not about just moving on and letting it happen and, having that be a part of your experience with the people in your life. Like if people close to me are going to use she, her pronouns with me all the time and then remember, be like, oh, whoops, they, them. But if they're not making a commitment to learn and understand and practice and be better, then it's pointless, because that's how you show me you really care about me, is by committing to learn my pronouns, understand my gender identity and why I use the pronouns that I use, and commit to doing better next time. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, this is very useful because I think like that's the most common question, no? Like how can I be respectful and meet other people's needs with my communication and with my approach, no? So and I think it's very important to have the tools to be prepared enough to, you know, actually coexist in a peaceful way. So what are some initiatives or projects that you, Andi, or Kai might know for educating and practicing, the use of pronouns?
Well, I don't know of any formal programs and initiatives, but I think there are lots of great resources on social media like Reddit and TikTok for practicing using pronouns. And something that I do, if I know someone who has changed their pronouns, or I meet someone new and I need to practice their pronouns, I will text a friend and say, hey, can you call me and can we chat about my new friend? And you ask me questions about them so that I can practice using their pronouns correctly. Kai, what about you?
That's an amazing practice. I've never done that before, and I will use that in the future. The one initiative that I was going to share is there's a website called practicewithpronouns.com, and yeah, you can go there. They have they, them pronouns. They have neopronouns on there, and it gives you, it's like a grammar activity that helps you practice them. So I've done it before, and I've seen that people share it in their bio sometimes for folks to practice. So yeah, that's a tool, and also just reiterate, like when, I guess not like, yeah, calling someone, but when I talk to my partner, it's always about like when I'm talking about someone else, whether they're new or whether they're old. I mean, I do make mistakes sometimes, and it's just about moving on, correcting myself, remembering who they are, and doing my best to make sure that I center them whenever I speak about them. So that's really how I have approached it in the past.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So I've also encountered people who get overwhelmed when they hear about neopronouns, and also like reclaimed pronouns such as it. And they get overwhelmed and they think, oh, how am I expected to remember all of these? And, people are going to attack me or berate me if I get them wrong. And I'm so afraid of being perceived as homophobic or transphobic. And I'm just so overwhelmed by all these pronouns and not knowing. And, and unfortunately, sometimes that leads to defensiveness where people will say, I don't support the use of neopronouns because it's too difficult for me and I'm afraid of being targeted or disrespected if I can't get these right. And I totally understand where that thought and fear comes from. But I think it's super important to remember that it's not like, for those people, it's not about you. And, people aren't out here saying, if you don't remember my neo pronoun that you've never heard before in your life until you met me, and you mess up the first time, and then I'm going to like blast you on social media, or I think there's a lot of fear from people outside of the LGBTQ plus community. They want to be allies, but they're just so afraid of messing up. And like, as you've heard Kai and me both say, we both mess up. Like, we both use they them pronouns. We don't use binary pronouns, and we even mess up. I've been a member of the LGBTQ community actively for 15 years. And I have many friends who are trans, many friends who have changed their pronouns over the years, and I mess up all the time. And it's just about committing to do better, understanding where you went wrong, and learning about gender and how gender is a construct and how we can dismantle heteronormativity and you know patriarchal constructions of gender and gender norms and gender roles. And I think that's really the important thing, and that's something that everybody can do. You don't need to be an expert in gender theory. You don't need to have a highbrow degree from some university specializing in you know whatever. Anybody can Google neopronouns and practice. What was the name of the website you gave, Kai?
I think it's practicewithpronouns.com.
Great. And anyone can do that. And I think it's a matter of educating yourself. And yes, it's okay to be a little afraid and a little intimidated, but that's how we grow as a society, is by leaning into the things that make us uncomfortable. And it's all about the safety and inclusion of the people around us. So are you willing to make yourself a little uncomfortable and step a little bit outside your comfort zone to let the other people around you know that you care about them and that they're welcome in your space, or that you're not going to disturb their space?
Absolutely. Lean into the discomfort. I love that.
Lean into it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, I think you said it before, where it's rooted in fear of making a mistake, messing up. And it's so true. It's not about you. Like, it's about ensuring that your friend, your neighbor, your colleague feels as welcome as you do in a space, and understanding that by misgendering someone, by using different pronouns than their correct pronouns, how it could make them feel that they're not part of a space. So really, I really love that. Lean into the discomfort.
Lean into it.
But one question too, Andi, is there's not only objection to neopronouns, there's a lot of objection just to they them pronouns. What have you heard? Have you heard anything from people when you introduce yourself and use your pronouns? What are some of the common things that you've heard?
Well, I'm really lucky and privileged that I haven't faced any uh, blowback when I introduce myself, mostly because I selectively only express my pronouns in spaces where I know I won't receive blowback. Which again is, part of my privilege as a cis passing, straight passing person. Um, but I've definitely seen online that there's lots of, oh, they is not a singular pronoun, and that's wrong. Like, we've debunked that already. Like, move on. And even if it was, like, who cares? Like, we make up new words all the time. Like, um, Google, like, that's new. Like, to tweet something, that's new. We make up words all the time, and people don't have a problem with it except when it makes them uncomfortable. Like, if I say, oh, I'm going to Zoom with Cai and Jorge this afternoon, everybody knows what I mean and nobody has a complaint. But if I say, my friend is coming over and A are bringing cheesecake, like people get all up in arms. I'm like, okay, like, why are you gatekeeping what words we can create and what words we can't? Is it because some words make you uncomfortable? And I think that's, the people who are willing to work on that will, and the people who are unwilling won't, which is unfortunate. Um, but we make up new words all the time. I'll say, oh, I'm going to Zoom with someone this afternoon. And you know what I'm saying, you know what I mean. But before a couple years ago, that wasn't a word. Or, I'm going to Google this thing, or they just tweeted, and you know what I mean. But we make up these words all the time, and people generally have no problem with it. But when you start saying neopronouns, some people get really upset because they're like, you can't just make up words. It's like, well, we do it all the time. Literally all words are made up words. They were made up at some point. You know what I mean? Just because some words have been around longer than others doesn't make them any more real than others.
Yeah, I like that approach, right? Like from language, or it can be like from gender, as we've been talking about, or also about the idea of binarism. For me, it all reduces to the idea of understanding that we are creating a world that differentiates from the binary systems, because that is actually what has been harmful for our societies as an overall, and which is imposing standards that we are supposed to meet, but sometimes we just don't want to meet them, because we're not feeling comfortable when we live under them. So I don't know if we can speak a bit of how strict binary gender norms impact folks of all genders, like from that approach. Like I like it how you do it from the language approach. So it would be great like to have the binary system into the analysis.
Yeah, well, the gender binary is, I think, much younger than gender inclusivity or gender creative thinking, because it is a like Western colonialist construct that has spread into the mainstream Western world, and the mainstream of our world operates in a patriarchal gender binary where there is two genders and there are certain traits and norms that are associated with each gender, and it's very limiting for gender expression and also for cultures and norms that have had expansive genders for time out of mind. But the Western influence and the colonialist influence tells the world that this is the only way, and this is the only way it's ever been done, and that transgender identities or gender expansive identities are new or a millennial trend or a Gen Z trend. But that's just not true. That's there are cultures and societies and civilizations that have had gender expansive identities for thousands of years. And I think just the implementation of and the support of the patriarchy and heteronormativity just continues to prop up and support the gender binary. So there's a misunderstanding that gender is a spectrum and that there's male and man on one side and female and woman on the other, and that everybody lands somewhere on that line. And the misconception is that if you're non-binary, you're smack dab in the middle, but that's not true. Gender is not a spectrum on a line. It's more like an amorphous blob. And there are many genders and many expressions of gender, and they're not mutually exclusive. Somebody can identify with multiple genders, Or like myself, I recognize that I have been one gender for the majority of my life, and I now am experiencing an identity that is different, but to me, that doesn't negate the gender that I've lived in for so long. So I consider those to be both parts of my identity, and it's not, they don't, they can exist together.
Agreed. I love to think about gender as this amorphous blob because it just, there is no right or wrong. There is no left or right. There is no woman or man. It's like a person that could exist anywhere, and it's fluid too. You can move within it. And I feel like that expresses gender so much better than a straight line could ever express gender.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This conversation has been amazing today. I mean, I've taken a few notes along the way about tips that people who are trying out new pronouns, or people who already acquired new pronouns and want to be a little more confident in making sure that people around them know, like wearing the lapel pin and wearing earrings and wearing clothing that specifically states their pronouns. And when you also about like meeting someone with a new pronoun, or someone that's changed their pronoun, talking that out with a friend and practicing talking about them, so you're affirming their identity and trying to make sure you're doing, like, you're speaking about them in the light of who they are. I also love that piece about leaning into discomfort. I think it goes both ways, right? For someone like myself who's a little nervous to be out around new people, but also for people who are cis and hetero, for them to create welcoming environments, they need to lean into the discomfort as well. And that just moving on, if you make a mistake, if you misgender or use someone's pronouns incorrectly, just move on, thank them, correct yourself, and practice and do better.
And commit to do better. Yeah.
Commit to do better. So those are some of the things that I took away from today's discussion. I really loved it. And we have one more question, kind of that call to action question to leave with our audience. So what are some other things that we can do to queer the cis heteronormative society?
I know I've said it a bunch of times already throughout this chat, but education and committing to do the work is the most important thing. You know, everyone has streaming services, or, you know, for the most part, and it's really not that difficult to go on to your, you know, video streaming platform and watch a documentary, or even go on TikTok, which, you know, super easy. It's a free app, and search, you know, in the tags for pronouns, and, you know, you can search specific ones, or you can just search the word pronouns, and, you know, you can find queer and trans voices who are expressing their, you know, their experiences, and they're doing the work to teach people how to learn and how to lean into the discomfort. And I think it can be very easy to get access to those resources. And it's just a question of, are you willing to do the work, and are you committed to making that change? And, you know, if everybody would just read an article, or, and I think you wrote a really awesome article, Kai, about pronouns at work, right?
Yes, I did. It's on my
Yeah,
Medium
so
platform.
right, so it's just about, you know, reading an article, watching some TikToks, maybe watching a documentary, listening to a YouTuber, listening to a podcast, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know, if everybody would do the work and share what they find, you know, if you listen to an awesome podcast like this one, it would be great if you could, you know, go on Facebook and be like, oh, I listened to this really great podcast and I learned so much. Um, you know, post the link, and maybe some of your Facebook friends will give a listen, you know. And I think as I said before, even if you are cis and you don't use pronouns other than the ones you were given at birth, that's perfectly fine. And like, nobody's going to tell you that you can't talk about it. No one's going to say, oh, that's for queer people only. Like, put your pronouns on your resume, put them in your social media, wear a lapel pin with your pronouns. Like, it's not just for gender creative people, it's for everybody. Everybody has pronouns. You have to be able to refer to people with a pronoun, otherwise you'd just be using their name all the time. So every single person has a pronoun, whether they know it or not. So I think if people can lean into it and just, I know I've been using that expression a lot, but if people can get comfortable with the idea and be open about sharing their pronouns and be progressive and be assertive about their pronouns, and that way you can show other people that you understand and that you are supportive and that you want to hear their pronouns and that you are going to respect their pronouns and that their gender is valid to you. I mean, not that we need to be seeking gender validation from other people, but that's a huge help.
Yeah, and building spaces for affirming processes, no, of gender identities as a whole, and yeah. So thank you for this conversation. It's been very useful to learn from you, and I think it's very important to share these topics, and yeah. Thanks to the audience also that has been listening, and yeah. See you in the next episodes.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was really meaningful to me when you reached out and invited me to speak about my experience and share my expertise. So I'm really grateful to you for spreading the knowledge and for doing the good work and doing the hard work. And I really appreciate you too.
Absolutely. And Andi, we really appreciate you being willing to speak with us today and for all the work that you have contributed to the Global Center. So we hope that we can work with you again in the future.
Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode. In the meantime, please visit our website and social media to keep up to date about us and to join our activities. www.theglobal-center.org. Find us on Facebook at We Are the Global Center, on Instagram at The Global Center, and on Twitter at Global Center Ed.